To mark the 25th anniversary of the end of apartheid, we are delighted here at the University of Pennsylvania Law School to host Justice Sisi Khampepe, a judge of the highest court, the apex court in South Africa, the Constitutional Court. Her journey to the Constitutional Court is an inspiring journey, one that started at the University of Zululand, a tribal law school, where at the end of her academic career at the university, she was inspired by a mentor to attend Harvard Law School for a graduate degree. On her return to South Africa, she helped to dismantle the apartheid system. But that journey itself is a story that is profoundly moving and powerful, and one that she will share with us. The way in which she created a fellowship at the LRC, the Legal Resource Center, which even today happens to be the leading strategic litigation organization in South Africa, and one that is a model of public interest litigation around the world. From there on, she went on to start her own law firm on labor law, which became the beacon for anti-discrimination work in South Africa, representing some of the largest trade unions in South Africa, and to become the leading labor rights lawyer in South Africa at a time when discrimination against women and persons of color were endemic in South Africa. So she was someone who was instrumental in ending apartheid and in developing a new democracy and in nation building, in building a nation that needed to heal and to reconcile. Justice Khampepe, my first question to you is about your role on the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as well as on the Amnesty Commission. Both commissions were led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is an iconic leader, not just in South Africa, but in the world. And his mantra was that there is no future without forgiveness. He has said, resentment is like drinking a poison and hoping it will kill your enemies. Forgiveness means abandoning your right to pay back the perpetrator in his own coin, but it is a loss that liberates the victim. In that profoundly powerful statement, he embodies the very complexity of amnesty, because what he says is that it is a loss, but that it at the end liberates the victim. So can you speak to that moment when you were working together with the Archbishop on building amnesty?
Yes, thank you, Rangita. I was one of the truth commissioners in the TRC, and I was appointed to sit in the Amnesty Committee. The job of the Amnesty Committee was to facilitate the granting of amnesty to perpetrators who had committed gross violations of human rights. The requirements for the granting of amnesty required amnesty applicants to complete application forms in which they set out the acts that they had committed in the conflict of the past for which gross violations of human rights had been committed. And one of the requirements that they had to satisfy was not only the criteria for the granting of amnesty, but for full disclosure of all the acts that they had committed in the gross violations of human rights. There was no requirement for an apology for the granting of amnesty. This was, of course, understood in the context that the accountability that individual perpetrators had to make was sufficient to enable South Africa to come out of its dark past, to unearth the horrendous acts of violations that had been committed by members of the security forces. Indeed, amnesty was a very powerful feature of the Truth Commission because it enabled the Commission to get the perspectives of the perpetrators of the violations of human rights, without which the work of the Commission would have been poorer because it would have had the perspectives of the victims of human rights violations only.
Justice Khampepe, There was a moment in time when you were the Amnesty Commissioner where you have said that it was a profoundly difficult moment in time for you personally, because this was a time when you were hearing from the perpetrators of crimes, perpetrators of what I would say would be crimes against humanity and torture. And the way they defended themselves was by saying that they did not think that black people had souls. In other words, that black people were not humans. Can you speak about that moment and your response to that?
Yes. I remember in one of the amnesty hearings when I had to ask a perpetrator why he had to go to such extent in torturing the victim that he had arrested. And his response was that he was able to torture to that extent because he had been taught that black people had no soul. Now you will understand that he was talking about black people, and I was a black person who was sitting there in the amnesty committee and had to consider his application for amnesty.
So that was a very powerful moment because, as you have said, here you are being the judge and being charged with amnesty. And the difficulty of going forward, but realizing that this was not only necessary, but essential in order to build a new nation and in order to heal. And you continued taking that philosophy to the court when you were appointed to the apex court in South Africa, the Constitutional Court.
Yes.
And as a judge of the Constitutional Court, you were one of those who helped to build a new jurisprudence which is lauded around the world on social, economic, and cultural rights. And the South African Constitutional Court is known for its jurisprudence on the right to housing, on the right to food, and those are important moments of jurisprudence around the world. But there is one particular moment that is important because it has resonance at this moment here at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. As an institution, we are facing a moment of crisis. And in 2016, South Africa too faced a moment of crisis when students protested against the rise in tuition fees. And you delivered the distinguished human rights lecture at the Stellenbosch University, where you addressed the student protests. And you said at the end of your speech, quoting Jacques Derrida's Force of Law, you said, "We are currently witnessing a wave of protest by university students countrywide. Education is a primordial necessity." Again, going back to the importance of social, economic, and cultural rights. And you said, "When seen in the context of our Constitution, education is the lifeblood of a democracy." And you went on to say, "Our Constitution abhors an ethic of obedience and is resistant to a culture of docility. We must work vigorously for a lasting enterprise. To give effect to this, we must do as Jacques Derrida encouraged, to hear, read, interpret, try to understand. Only then do we do justice and accept the call to arms against entrenched dominance, to democratically shape our own accepted values, paradigms, and institutions as a society." So there are three particular values that you advance. One, the right to protest, the right to engage, and a right, as you say, to come together in order to proactively demonstrate against violations of human rights.
Yes.
The second is the right to education. You say that that is a primordial right embedded in your Constitution. And third, what you say is that in order for us to build a lasting enterprise, our Constitution advances a value of disobedience. So that value and ethic of disobedience is entrenched in your Constitution.
Yes.
So can you speak to those three values?
Yes. I think it is important to understand that in the life of a student, there comes a moment when he has to have the right to speak about her concerns relating to educational issues. And as the Truth Commission has taught me, it is important to give an opportunity to a person who feels victimized by a situation to be listened to. So the right to be able to give a person a hearing is very intricate to the notion of being able to engage in a dialogue.
So you went on to say that not only is education a primordial necessity, but meaningful participation is part of the transformative process of a constitution. So that transformative process of a constitution is a very important part of your own philosophy as a jurist.
Yes.
Can you speak to that?
It's very, very important because it actually enables us to move forward. You've got to transform, you've got to change, you've got to be able to change that which otherwise would not be capable of being changed if you do not engage in a dialogue. So students must be listened to and they must be responded to in a way that transcends the divisions between a teacher and a scholar.
So you also spoke about a mobilized and engaged grassroots as another branch of government. And I think that's a very important and powerful statement, that the grassroots engagement is a branch of the government, an alternative branch of the government, part of our democracy. Can you speak to that?
Yes. The grassroots embodiment is that of the students themselves as being members. In a university structure, you kind of think of yourselves as the structure that is important, but you forget that the important people are the ones that must be listened to, being the students. They are the grassroots level people.
So, Justice, you were recently appointed as the first woman acting Chief Justice of South Africa. This is the apotheosis of any legal career. And you reached that pinnacle of leadership through a journey that has been tremendously exciting, tremendously powerful, but also very challenging. You came of age as a lawyer in apartheid South Africa. Can you share with us some vignettes from that journey?
Yes. I completed my tribal education university in 1980. And after completing my university career, I then enrolled as a fellow at the Legal Resources Center. This is one of the first public interest law firms in the country and still continues to be an important public interest law firm that is there to fight for the rights of the people who are downtrodden. After enrolling as a fellow, I then got a message that I had been accepted for my studies at Harvard for my LLM. I proceeded to go to Harvard Law School, and upon completion of my studies, I returned to South Africa. But before I returned, when I was at Harvard, I was given a letter of appreciation by Professor David Smith, in which he actually said I would be a great lawyer in South Africa and I should go back to my country to be able to share the insights and knowledge that I had gained at Harvard Law School. For me, that was almost a joke because I had no real country to come to because, as you know, we were saturated by oppression and repression in our country. But I returned nevertheless to South Africa, restarted my fellowship program with the Legal Resources Center. After completion of my fellowship program, I had to look for articles of clerkship. I didn't think that I would have a problem since I was armed with a master's degree from a prestigious university like Harvard. But little did I know that in South Africa, with the oppression that existed at the time, the fact that you had a degree from Harvard Law School did not matter for anything. I applied to no less than 10 law firms for a position as an article clerk, and none of the firms accepted me. The one that managed to give me an interview told me that it had given me an interview because it was curious to see this woman who claimed, underline claimed, to have a master's degree from Harvard. But nevertheless, to cut the story short, I was denied. My applications were declined. I was at that point at a time when I was thinking of leaving the legal profession, and I had become accepted as an overseas educating coordinator for the people who had funded me to go to Harvard. I spoke about this dilemma with Arthur Charles Carson, who was the director of the Legal Resources Center. It was through his intervention that I ultimately managed to get accepted to one of the law firms that had initially refused me. And it was even then a conditional acceptance that I would be accepted to serve articles on condition that I would not be expected to become an admitted attorney and serve in the law firms after the completion of my articles. That was a difficult journey for me to walk through.
Justice Khampepe, I want to end by congratulating you on your appointment as South Africa's first woman acting Chief Justice, the position that you will take on the 1st of November in 2 weeks' time. And as you have said so eloquently, South Africa continues to be a negotiated nation. And you have said it can be truly transformative if we allow meaningful engagement to ensure, if we listen to the plurality of voices and attempt to do justice to them, even if the process is difficult or seemingly insurmountable, we are taking part in transformation. So your journey has looked as if it is seemingly insurmountable, but you have, with courage and with enormous resilience, you have continued on to not only grow and inspire others, but in this enterprise of nation building. So we are once again so proud to host you at the University of Pennsylvania, especially at a time when your voice, a plurality of voices calling for meaningful engagement and transformative process and a negotiated settlement born out of that plurality of understanding is not only essential, but so powerful in a turning point in our nation and in our institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to have been invited by this prestigious university. It is greatly appreciated.